Super Bowl, we and all the other networks sit down and review the season that just ended, talk a little bit about what our wish list of games is for the season to come. And then over the next couple months, we have a lot of dialogue and a lot of back and forth about which games could potentially anchor a national window, games that should be early, games that should be late, getting a good geographic balance across the country for each of our weeks. And it's a lot of conversation. We dive pretty deep into the weeds. We nerd out on it, as you say. And then ultimately, we all get the schedule that the public saw last night, and we find out how well we did. We find out how well we lobbied the league. You know, there are a handful of games that every network wants, and we're kept in suspense as to which ones we're going to get. And when we find out yesterday that we got a game like Green Bay, Kansas City, or Green Bay, New Orleans, we feel pretty good about the process.
Love it. Well, Mobile Hill, all show we've been talking about the release of the schedule and what it means for the teams and what it means for the fans. But what does it mean from a TV perspective?
Yeah, look, I really believe that the release of the NFL schedule is the most important day of the year in the TV industry. If you look back over the last 12 months, 80 of the 100 most watched shows of the last year were NFL games, which gives you some indication of how dominant the league really is. Every single Fox NFL game last year delivered a bigger audience than the Academy Awards. I really think that where the television business is right now, if you have the NFL, you matter and you're relevant. And if you don't have the NFL, you're almost competing to be the least irrelevant. That's how important it is, and that's why the release of this schedule matters so much.
Wow, only speak for yourself. Outrating the NFL is all I heard from that. All right, so, Michael, we know the Packers are an extremely important franchise for the NFC package. How will Rodgers leaving the Packers impact the schedule?
Well, what we hope is that Rodgers doesn't leave the Packers. You know, what we would love to see is for the league MVP to be back in Lambeau this fall, quarterbacking the green and gold. That's the best outcome for us. But we have the flexibility in our schedule to adapt to events as they happen if Rodgers ends up somewhere else or ends up deciding not to play at all. Because we regionalize 5 to 7 games a week, we always have that capability to move a game from 1 p.m. to 4:25, or take a game that we thought was going to go to 90% of the country and cut it back to a smaller percentage. And that flexibility really insulates us. So a good example is Week 15, which you see on the screen. Green Bay is scheduled to play at Baltimore. We're listing that as a 1 p.m. game. We also have Dallas Giants listed as a 1 p.m. game. Seattle at the Rams is a 4:25 game. And we can really wait as long as the week after Thanksgiving to decide which of those 1 p.m. games is going to go to 4:25 and be seen by most of the country. If Aaron Rodgers is in Green Bay and the Packers are playing well, that's a great candidate to go to 4:25. If there's a different set of circumstances, we can always take that Dallas Giants game, drop it down to 4:25 and showcase that. And that flexibility is really why the Fox 4:25 window has been the #1 show on TV for the last 12 years.
You know, it's so crazy getting the behind the scenes of all this. Because, Sel, as a player, we just hear that our game gets moved to 4:25 or to 1 p.m. or to 7 at night. It gets flexed. But we don't really get the inside details of it all. So, Mobile Hill, appreciate you. Now, we know that every network's excited about their schedule today. But what sets Fox's schedule apart from all the others and makes it so unique?
You know, I think that the power of the Fox NFL package is the power of the NFC. You know, the NFC has always been our identity. I think that in the Cowboys and the Packers, we have the two brands that traditionally drive the most viewership. We obviously now have the Super Bowl champions in Tom Brady and the Bucs. That kind of gives us a third marquee team. And we have the biggest markets in the country. You know, from a business perspective, what really matters about the NFC is that those local economies in NFC markets, obviously New York and LA are in both conferences, but on the NFC side, we've got Chicago, Philly, Washington, Seattle, San Francisco. Those local economies in the NFC generate $2 trillion more in economic activity than the 16 AFC markets do. So when you're trying to put forward a media business and make this package work financially, that power of the NFC local economies really goes a long way.
Man, this is fascinating. I know we're in the same building too, Mike, so I hope you have an open door policy because I'll be upstairs geeking out on this.
You're always welcome.
Yeah, some of the factors that go into the creation of the schedule that myself, the average fan may not be aware of.
Well, I think when the league puts the schedule together, they're really considering three major buckets of factors. One is obviously television viewership. You know, media revenue accounts for most of the revenue of the NFL. And I think the needs of the networks are taken very seriously by the people at the league that put together the schedule. Another is just competitive fairness. And I want to ask you guys a little bit about that in a moment. But the league obviously has to take into account things like cross-country road trips, not asking a team to play 3 consecutive road games, things that might actually affect outcomes on the field. And then third, there are just logistical considerations in the NFL markets around the country. The city of New Orleans will host Jazz Fest this October. Normally that's a spring event. The pandemic has pushed it to the fall. The league takes that into account. They gave the Saints a road game in the first week of Jazz Fest and a bye week in the second week of Jazz Fest. So that's something where the league is taking into account factors that don't have anything to do with TV, don't have anything to do with football, but have a lot to do with just the civic life of the cities that are participating in the league.
Shout out to Jazz Fest for having an influence like that. Who would have ever thought that? Oh, that's crazy, man. Jazz Fest.
Mobile Hill, let me ask you this, because there are a ton of storylines all offseason. Quarterbacks going from one coast to another. Star quarterbacks trying to leave their teams altogether and host game shows. Which storylines pique the network's interest most?
Well, I think you start with those 3 marquee teams that we talked about. We always want to focus on the Bucs, the Cowboys, and the Packers for our 425 windows. But beyond that, I think 2 really important teams on our side are the Bears and the 49ers. They've both drafted quarterbacks high in the first round, Chicago moving up to get Justin Fields. And I think that makes both those teams really intriguing from a TV perspective. They both come from big markets. They've had some recent success. Bears in the playoffs last year. San Fran in the Super Bowl just 2 years ago. So I think those are storylines that are really intriguing for us and have a lot of potential upside. Now, if I can, I want to ask you guys a question. Am I allowed to ask you guys a question?
Of course, of course. Speak for yourself.
Great.
You can do your thing.
Yes. Look, I know this will come as a shock to you, but I never played in the NFL, right?
Oh.
I know. It comes as a surprise to me, too.
You're 6'4", though. You got the size.
So I want to know, from a player's perspective, what does it mean to you guys? And when you were in the league and the schedule came out, you got a chance to see where you were going to be playing and when. How does a player look at the schedule? Does it not matter that much, or what do you look for?
Mobile Hill, I look for 3 things specifically. True story, as soon as the schedule comes out, I anxiously look for 3 things. The first is this. Do I get to play my brother, and if so, where? Because I was in the league when my brother was in the league, so I'm always like, okay, am I going to Arizona? He was usually on the Cardinals. Is he coming to Philadelphia when I'm in Philly? The second thing I look for, Mobile Hill, very simply, are we playing on Thanksgiving? Majority of my career was with the Eagles, so am I playing the Lions on Thanksgiving? Am I playing the Cowboys on Thanksgiving? I'm born and raised in Dallas, so do I get to go home on Thanksgiving and see my family? Because traditionally in the NFL, you don't get to see your family on Thanksgiving. The third, and no slight to my family, but the most important, where am I playing in December? Because if I got to go to Lambeau in December, it's going to be cold. Hopefully, all the cold cities you go to in December, they have domes. So if I'm playing the Lions, are we playing the Lions in December? Ooh, are we playing the Vikings in December? If I am playing the Packers, hopefully I'm playing the Packers in October, maybe early November, and then I start to look at time of the game because the temperature will drop drastically.
Oh, man, great answers. I have a couple of those, and I also have more. Michael, be prepared, because I was all in on the schedule release. To be candid, I would grab the schedule, and back in those days, it wasn't digital. It was actually a paper schedule it felt like we would get. And I would sit there and circle the games I thought we would win and cross out the ones we were going to lose. Every year, my record was wrong on paper. I was 11-5 or better every year on paper, 5-11 in real life. Then I would look at home games versus road games. I was like, okay, is it going to be tougher here or is it going to be tougher there? Then I would look for primetime games, Monday night games. We didn't have all this Thursday, Sunday, and all that. I was just like, when are we going to play in front of everybody by ourselves? Any odd starting times, like, man, we got to get up that early, or, whoa, we playing late that game. Any cold-ass games in December, like Green Bay in December, I'm like, oh, God, Michael, why did y'all schedule this? And then I would look for the best cities. I would circle that one right there. I say, And I was single at the time, Michael, so I would say, who's flying out to meet me to watch the game? Wink, wink. So I would look for that. The low-key cities that the coach's radar would be off, like Indy. Coach is like, oh, y'all can have, go out late. We ain't, you better be careful, Indy coach. Which cities are close to the family I would always look for, knowing that they're going to beg for a free trip. So I was like, all right, where we going, where the whole family's going to congregate.